Amen. We're going to try that. There we go. Awesome. Thank you, guys. Jesus' response to compassion. I know it's not a great grab you title, okay? But he nonetheless does. And so we're going to get there. But let's flip to the first slide. It's kind of interesting. I'm a student of management. That's what I studied in college. And I am amazed at some of the theories and some of the findings that psychologists have uncovered about management science. I'm amazed because I can relate Jesus' walk and Jesus' plan with those easily. And so I've been thinking about this finding done by two psychologists back in 1959. They proposed there were 5 types of power that involves social influence. 5 types. Now, admittedly, there probably are more than 5. Okay? And in 1982, they added a 6th, and probably if we were to advance this to this season in our life, we would probably add a 7th called social media. But we're going to stick with these 5 as our sort of a framework. And we're not going to spend too much time understanding these 5 types of power, but I think it's a good reference point for us to frame our thoughts about a scripture I want to share, okay? So, the 5 types of power that these two psychologists proposed were these. Reward power. And by the way, you are very familiar with these types of power. You might not have labeled them as such, but you are very familiar. And when we get further into this, you'll identify different types of power and how it influences you, okay? So there's reward power, there's coercive power, there's legitimate power, there's referent power, and expert power. 5 types of power, okay? Influences social, involves social influence. Okay, let's take a look at the next slide. We're going to identify some of these powers. Reward power, okay? And you know, if you're a kid, you know all about reward power, okay? Reward power is mom and dad have a bag of candy, and they want you to clean your room. So if you clean your room, you get a piece of candy. There's a reward. In order to achieve compliance, employers oftentimes might use pay incentives. If you work Saturday, I'll give you time and a half. See? If you don't miss any work, I'll give you 2 extra days next year because I need you now. See, reward power. You do something and I give you a nice little reward. That has power, okay? Second type, coercive power. This power is sort of evil, and it uses coercion to threaten people, okay? To punish them, perhaps. Bullying, we see that a lot. That's coercive power. You get bullied in school, you get bullied on the job. Your employer might threaten a layoff. If you don't get here on time, I'm going to fire you, okay? I'm going to use my position as somebody that has coercive power to get you to do something, okay? So we have coercive power. Then there's legitimate power. And this is the power that comes when you use your position to achieve compliance. We're all familiar with this one. You'll do it because I said so and I'm your mother. Okay? Your mother is legitimate power in your family. Okay? When you were a kid. The President of the United States, like him or not, has legitimate power. Okay? He can use his position to influence compliance, to force compliance. Your boss has legitimate power. I was a treasurer for 30 years at South Jeff. I had power because if you wanted to get reimbursed for a claim, and Terry would know this, that you had to get my authorization in order for you to get that cash. And if you didn't do what I asked you to do, I'm sorry, I'm not going to agree. That's legitimate power. Okay? Expert power. And you've bumped into these people before. They've got so much experience, they've got so much knowledge, in a certain area, they immediately have power. Somebody like technology. Those guys who know how to do that stuff, boy, they have power. They can make you do just about anything. Why? They're experts. Talk to somebody who's been hacked. Their number one goal is to try to get them out of that trouble. They don't need me. I don't have any power there. They need somebody with technology expertise. Expert power. So, 5 types of power. There's 4 of them. We'll get to the 5th one in just a minute. Let's turn to Matthew chapter 8, verses 5 through 13, and I'll read this for you. Now, I normally would have my wife do that because she's much better at reading than I am. This is the story of the faith of the centurion. And let me change that. Dale, let me change that a little bit. It's the account of the faith of the centurion. Okay? When Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him asking for help. Lord, he said, my servant lies at home paralyzed and in terrible suffering. And Jesus said to him, I will go and heal him. The centurion replied, Lord, I don't deserve to have you come under my roof, but just say the word and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes. And this one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. When Jesus heard this, he was astonished and said to those following him, I tell you the truth, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. I say to you that many will come from the east and the west and will take their places at the feast with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the subjects of the kingdom will be thrown outside into darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then Jesus said to the centurion, go, it will be done just as you believed it would. And his servant was healed at that very hour. Now, we think about the faith of the centurion and how miraculous and powerful that was. Can you imagine? That blows me away. I've studied this and read over it for 35 years or 40 years, whatever. And I'm amazed that this centurion could say to Jesus, just send your word. Now, look, when we lay hands on people, some might say it's in our hands that people get healed. Jesus often laid hands on people. He made mud, right? Put it on somebody's eyes, touched somebody's ears, called out to Lazarus, grabbed them, come. set you free from the thing that grabs you. But I don't know too many times, even before this, where somebody would have the faith to say, Jesus, just send your word. That is amazing. That is amazing. Especially coming from a centurion. Let's look at a centurion for a moment. Let's turn the slide. There's a couple things about centurions that are pretty impressive. A centurion, as you would guess, is in charge of 100 Roman soldiers. The century. Centurions were very competent in administrative workings, okay? They knew how to get things done. They were tested, tried. When a centurion walked into anywhere, you knew he was a centurion just by his clothes, his uniform, his helmet, the awards that he received from battles won were all proudly displayed on his chest. He had a sword and a shield, 2 shields I heard. So it was impressive and stunning, decorative. Everybody knows who the centurion is. He even carried a staff, very interesting, a little shorter than that staff. And he used it to let others around him know where he was. He raised it up, waved it in the air, so his soldiers who were fighting with him could find him. But he also used it as a stick to discipline his soldiers. Just like that, a centurion. He was typically on special assignments, like our special forces. You know those guys. You don't want to mess with them. Those guys are dedicated, forward-thinking. They're all in. Centurions were the same way. I read someplace where the centurions are regarded, even to this day, as the greatest military leaders of all time. These were the top of the top. Now, if anybody knew about power, it would be the centurion. Did he not have reward power? I can picture it. He's talking to a soldier, and he says, which kind of duty do you want? Guarding the palace or the jail? Reward power. He said, I noticed that you were out of line. I tell you what, the next time I see you do that, you're going to the front lines of the battle. Coercive power. Centurions had legitimate power in that they were appointed by the Roman Senate. So they were highly regarded and supported from those legislative bodies around them. They had legitimate power. When they spoke, you listened. You didn't. I don't think there was the back and forth communication that we might find in administration today. Okay? I think it's, I said it, you better do it. Okay? They were experts in their field. They carried a special sword, 36, 38 inches long, sharp. They were expert at it. They were the guys you wanted to call when you were in trouble, because they could get you out. There was something different about this centurion. And I think those differences we should take a look at. Let's go to the next slide. This centurion had compassion for his suffering servant. He didn't say he had compassion for his soldiers underneath him. It said he had compassion for his servant, which it may be a fine line there, but I think it speaks of the compassion of the centurion. He was very concerned about his servant. He had compassion on him. In Luke's gospel, the same story is told. The same account is recorded. But in Luke's gospel, it was reported that this centurion helped build the temple, the synagogue, and he loved God's people. This is a centurion now, who knows all kinds of power, influence, leverage, but he helped people. He loved God's people. He also knew he was powerless to help his servant. He couldn't do anything about it. He couldn't call in his, as they say in the Navy, he couldn't call in his chits, favors. He couldn't call in a neighboring centurion to help him out. He knew he was powerless. Not something that is often felt by a centurion, I'm sure. He understood authority, and he understood the power that Jesus had. He said, look, Jesus, I'm a man under authority, and I have authority over those underneath me. I say come, and they come. I say go, and they go. I say do this, and they do it. See, he had power. He also understood power. He understood that Jesus also had that power. He was humble. Not a trait commonly found in centurions. He was humble because we know this, because early on in the account, it said, Lord, I don't deserve to have you come under my roof. That verse sounds familiar because it's the same sentiment that John the Baptist used when he said, there's one coming after me whose sandals I'm not worthy to unloose. Same concept. The centurion was humble, unworthy, and he knew it. He had faith, a most amazing faith, I think, that's recorded in the Scriptures. He said, just say it, and it'll be done. Now, I don't know how far away they were. Maybe 50 miles, 100 miles, who knows? It doesn't really matter. There's no time or distance issue with God, is there? See, the centurion knew that. The centurion had referent power. Let's go to this one. Now, referent power I didn't talk about, did I? I talked about the four others, but I didn't talk about this one. Here are some of the characteristics of referent power. First of all, it relies, those that have referent power have high level of character and ethics. They're looked up to because of their character, their quality, their ethical behavior. They have earned the trust and respect of those around them. How many leaders today would miss out on these two? They help and empower others. Those with referent power are not demanding, but they help. The centurion helped God's people, loved them. See? This power comes from a relationship level, not a positional level. You'll do this because of who I am. That's not how reverent power works. It's based on relationship. We're in this together. He thinks of others' needs ahead of their own. If you did a web search, and you did a web search on referent power, you'll see one of the characteristics is they think of others' needs ahead of their own. That sounds like the centurion to me. He thought of his servant first. Now maybe you know people who fit that bill. Now I'm talking about the centurion here, but at the same time, I'm also talking about the Savior, aren't I? Oftentimes it's passive. This was very interesting, I thought, in that the influencer may be unaware that it's really happening. I don't think the centurion decided in his mind. He says, I know what I'll do. I'll help God's people. I'll love them so that sometime when I get a chance to pray for my servant that he'll be healed. I don't think he did that at all. I don't think he looked at the end game. I think he looked at God's people and he started to love them. And he started to do for them what they couldn't do for themselves. Without any strings attached. Without any hope of reward. He was a servant leader. Think about that. A servant leader. We have a lot of people in our lives who are leaders. But how many of them are servant leaders? The leader that thinks you're good only. Thinks of your good only. Not many. Jesus tried to teach his disciples, and he's trying to teach us in that same way. He said, the Gentiles, their leaders rule it over them. Coercively, right? Positionally. Jesus, what did he say? It shall not be so among you. In Mark, he says, if anyone wants to be first, he must be a servant of all. And I think there's a line in there. I think we need to understand, at least that's what I'm being convinced of, that we're not a servant to get something. Okay? No, because look, we do things to get things. Right? I mean, if we do things to get things. I work to get paid. Okay? I'm nice to my wife, so she'll be nice to me. I'm nice to my children, so they'll be nice to me. I provide for my children, so they'll provide for me. Okay? When the day is coming, right? In fact, I've got it on them. Okay? I got the goods on my kids. They have to. They've lived in my house long enough, so now I get a chance to live in theirs. Okay? So we've got that covered. Okay? But we got to be careful about this. Because a servant leader doesn't look at the end. He looks at that person. He says, you'll be a servant. And sometimes we go, okay, I'm a servant, Lord. Now what's in it for me? That's where we fail. See, a person with referent power is a servant leader. Somebody who cares about the other person. This centurion was something. So there was a question I have. So why did Jesus do what the centurion asked? Nobody's ever asked it of Jesus before. Now, there were times, and certainly the centurion heard of Jesus' amazing walk, but he never heard this one. I don't think. Dale, you'll check me up on that. Did anyone up to this point ever suggest that Jesus could just send his word and somebody be healed? I don't think so. Not that I'm aware of. So this is outside the bounds of where Jesus' ministry was. Could he really send his word and heal somebody? The centurion risked it. So why did Jesus do what the centurion asked? Well, first of all, I think Jesus saw his compassion. I think Jesus responds to compassion. We hear it all the time. He had compassion. Remember? He had compassion on the 5,000 who waited for something to eat. He had compassion on those without the shepherd. Remember that story? I think it's in a parable of the sheep and the shepherd. He had compassion. And I think Jesus responds to compassion. Now, the centurion took it one step further. And this is a good lesson for us. He had compassion. He took action. He did something about it. I had a chance one time, quite amazing. We were in worship at Faith Fellowship. My wife was sitting here, worshiping, and there was a woman that was in the hospital. And I can't recall her name. Escapes me right now. She was a severe diabetic. And she was in the hospital. And I leaned over and I said, I really think I should, after church, I'd go pray for this person. And my wife, who's, of course, awesome, she's like, take action now. She says, well, go now. Well, I can't go now. We're in the middle of worship. I would leave church. She said, would you go now? So I said, okay, well, all right. So I bebop to the hospital. I go in the room, and there she is, surrounded by probably 4 or 5 nurses. And I said, I came in the room, and all of a sudden, the nurses part, and there's the woman sitting on the bed, laying on the bed, and they're trying. And I said, I'm here to pray for, I can't remember her name, not Gladys, but something like that. And they went, we can't get a vein. We've been trying for an hour. We can't, our veins were shot. We can't get anything. We're not sure what to do. I said, let me pray for her. I moved right up, just walked right in, just bullied my way in, if you will, right to her and laid hands on her and just asked that the Lord open her vein. And the nurse said, oh, we got a vein. It's good. We're good. I said, well, awesome. I think I'll go. And she said, could you come down the hall with me? We have a few other cases. I thought that was hilarious. But you see, the centurion took action. He not only had compassion, but he took action. And he sought that action from Jesus, not in his own hands. He didn't have anything tied to him. And he even said, look, it's not me. I don't have it. I've got all this other stuff, but I don't have what this guy needs. Sometimes when we come to Jesus, we need to bring just him. not us. And he was humble. He knew where he stood. Not higher than he ought. He was a centurion. But he realized where he was in the chain of things. He wasn't even worthy. I think that's a key element here. Sometimes we boast and we brag. That sounds too cold and heartless. I don't mean that. Jesus has to listen to us because we're his children. You know what? We're not worthy. Okay? We're not. There's nothing good in us. No, not one. We're not worthy. We come to him because who he is, not who we are. He trusted in Jesus. He knew the answer, and it wasn't in him. It was in Jesus. And of course, he had great faith. You know, one of the things that somebody with referent power has or does is transfers power. You know your bosses that you've worked for before. You know those that are coercive, reward-based. You know them. You've lived under them. But if you've ever bumped into somebody with referent power, what do? They empower their employees. They give them the things they need. They almost work themselves out of a job. They transfer their power to somebody else. Now, as I'm thinking about this, and we're going to close here in a sec, I'm thinking about two sort of lanes. You know, we're thinking about the centurion and talking about him and all of his understanding of power and authority and leverage. And we're thinking also of Jesus too, because Jesus had referent power like nobody's business. So I'm thinking along those two lines, and I'm hoping that we don't get too confused here. But I believe Jesus uses referent power in many different ways. And he enables us to do his work. He gives us the gifts of the Spirit of healings, not because of me or you, because of him. He gives us those things. So, Jesus and the centurion had referent power. Jesus expects us to be the same. He doesn't want us to use coercion. You know you're going to hell if. He doesn't use rewards. If you come to church, you'll get a $20 bill or a 10% discount on your... You'll come to church because I'm your father. How long does that last? Doesn't last very long. I think he uses referent power, thinking of others first, with nothing to gain from me. Jesus responds to compassion, to action, humility, and faith. Let me say that again. Jesus responds to compassion, action, humility, and faith. God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. The centurion was humble. Even though he had all the stuff, and he didn't rose to the top of his profession, He met Jesus and he was humble. He was humbled by it. I think Jesus responds to humility. He responds to faith for sure. Faith not in who we are, but who he is.